This is a great opportunity, I think, because I think Cal's activities and his expertise go well beyond just this issue of shale gas, although that's probably one of the more exciting things that we like to talk about. So what we thought we'd do is a sort of a change in the format is take the next 10 minutes and really, Cal and I will have a chat on a couple of questions outside of the shale gas that I think are well within the kinds of things that that he has to either worry about or get excited about. So I think the first question really is this, and I think you started talking about this, which is, as you look at the regulatory landscape in the U.S. and abroad, so not just the U.S. but also abroad, what do you think the key issues and the changes that you think the chemical industry should be prepared to deal with, and particularly look, at a crystal ball looking forward? And obviously one important area is environmental, but that's not the only area. And of course, one significant thing when you talk about Washington is there have been some changes in leadership at the EPA and so forth, so obviously that's expected to have some impact as well.
Yeah, I still think though that the major challenge that we face both domestically and globally as a chemical industry is how do we ensure that there again is a risk-based assessment and a science-based assessment of the safety of the chemicals for their intended use. As an industry, we're committed, we're obligated to ensure that our chemicals that go into any product is safe, with the level of exposure. But you see a lot of other countries, and even the EU, to some extent, with their REACH program, is adopting, in some instances, provisions that take a little more of a hazard base, or if there's a level of a chemical in the product, then they think that it ought to be regulated much more differently. And the EU also has spending an incredible amount of resources too to try to ensure that other countries or even international bodies also embrace this more hazard-based approach. And it's incumbent upon the U.S. and what we are most interested with a successful reform of our TSCA program is that we can demonstrate that there's a better alternative. There's another regulatory and an assessment alternative that will clearly also demonstrate the safety of the chemicals in commerce, but will do so in a way that will not stifle innovation. And so what we deal with a lot here, both in the U.S. and the EU, but it goes beyond that. It goes to the United Nations. They have their environmental program where you see them engaging in different studies that are trying to advance what would be, again, a more hazard-based approach that has the potential to really stifle, commerce. Because just as we look for a federal preemption in the United States, because we don't want to have our member companies having to comply with 50 different regulations, we also want to see to the degree possible, is not the harmonization is not the right term, but because we don't want, but the narrowing of the differences in regulations throughout the world so that there aren't multiple national standards that stifle commerce.
Cal, you put forth a really good case about how the competitiveness of the U.S. chemical industry has been enhanced because of shale gas, which not only improves raw material for things that are made out of that thing, but also energy, because obviously electricity is now being made out of natural gas and so forth. But if you look at the other aspects of competitiveness, because obviously raw material and energy alone is not, where do you see the U.S. sort of competitiveness in the different other areas? I'm going to give you one example. I'm sure it varies quite a bit by sector. So for example, pharmaceutical intermediates has been a challenge because of the increase in competition from India and China and so forth. But as you look beyond just the raw material and the energy costs, what do you see happening with the U.S. chemical industry in terms of other areas of competitiveness?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We have a lot of multinationals that are not based in the United States or part of our membership, and a lot of them are making investments. And it's kind of interesting. Even a couple of those companies are from India, and then we also have Brazil as well. And what they will tell you when they look at the alternatives, and I'd even include this in the South Africa too, when they look at the alternative investment opportunities they have, certainly one of the chief advantages we talked about is the feedstock of the natural gas. But it's also, we complain about a lot of our regulations, but we still have a fairly high degree of regulatory certainty in the United States, comparatively to some other regions of the world. And what we also have a tremendous advantage too is, investment capital. We have a structure and a system here that, also gives us some, global advantages on that front. So, right now, this is, when you look at, economic certainty, when you look at even kind of domestic security interest, the United States, and even financial security interest, is that we have a lot going for us right here in the United States. It goes beyond just the energy and the feedstock competitiveness.
That's actually an interesting point, because certainly, for example, places like India, there's a lot of turmoil about political uncertainty, corruption, and so forth, that goes well beyond just cost of labor, for example. Now, I'm going to be a little either fair or unfair, I'm not sure which. I'm going to ask you a question that has nothing to do with chemicals. One of the things about your career is that you spend a lot of time in Congress, and you know a lot of people there and follow and as part of your job, you're really following what's going on in Washington. But as you look in your crystal ball, what path do you see this country taking, particularly as we hit a whole set of additional deadlines with regard to the budget and the debt ceiling and so forth? I had breakfast with Cal once, and he gave a prediction who was absolutely 100% correct at the time about what was happening in the next couple of months. But what do you see happening? Because obviously that's a big factor for those of the people here in the audience who are running businesses that, for better or worse, have to deal with the U.S. economy and what's happening in Washington.
Well, I regret that this is being taped because most of my predictions, I'm trying to remember which one I made there that was actually turned out to be right.
Well, by the way, we'll agree that this tape this part of your speech will see the lighter day, but not this. How's that?
Well, just in terms of full disclosure, I was a kind of a pro-trade, pro-business Democrat, and that was one of the reasons why I left. Is when you get all of us that were that persuasion in one taxi that was in Congress, it was time to leave. It's unfortunate that we have a very polarized Congress right now, and I was elected the same year that John Boehner, who's the Speaker of the House, and we developed a really terrific relationship, and it continues to today. John Boehner has absolutely the toughest job in the country maybe today, because he has a relatively small faction of his Republicans that are so conservative that will not even accept a compromise that would be arguably good for the economy, but even be good for the political interest of the Republican Party. I think, though, that they learned a significant number of them learned a lesson from the shutdown that occurred. Can anyone hardly even remember the shutdown now? It was only about a month or 6 weeks ago. It's been eclipsed by the Obamacare. But I think a lot of those folks that were leading the effort to shut the government down there, that accrued significant political damage to the Republicans, I think they learned some lessons. Because what they now realize is that the Obama healthcare rollout was being eclipsed by their shutdown message there. They basically took their greatest political opportunity off the front pages for 2 weeks, and once they got the shutdown behind them, their fortunes have turned. I don't think that they're going to go into the December timeframe when they have to extend the debt ceiling. Well, the debt ceiling doesn't have to extend until into January, but for the continuing resolutions funding the budget, I don't think that they're going to ever again precipitate another shutdown. And I think what will happen is that they'll reach a combination which will not be a big deal that some people talk about, which would result in more taxes, and with the reduction in entitlement spending, I think that's just too optimistic for them to be quite that rational, is that what I think they'll end up doing is banking the sequestration cuts, which is what's already on the autopilot. So there'll be another marginal reduction in some of the government spending that will actually continue the glide path that we've seen over the last couple of years. Hopefully that they'll also agree to give more flexibility to the agencies of government in terms of how they implement those cuts, so that they can be done in a much more judicious in a manner that is more reflective of the priorities of, basically of the country. But I think you're going to see the Republicans find a way not to be in a situation where they're going to be shutting down the government again, because I don't think they want to have a rerun of this. But they got some hardcore folks out there that might surprise us on this.
An offshoot of that question is, I've read 3 articles in the last 2 days saying this may be a difficult situation where a president actually becomes lame duck only 1 year into his second term. Do you believe that's true based on what's happening currently, or do you think that might be able to escape that issue?
I think that if you look back in history, every president in their second term, when they're getting into their second and third year of their second term, is always lame duck. And so I'm not overly, I think the president probably still has some opportunities to advance some meaningful initiatives. But this, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, it's created a lot of vulnerabilities to the administration to date, and Democrats to date, that especially those who are up for, there's 21 Democratic senators are up for re-election in 2014. I think almost every one of them have voted for the Affordable Care Act if they were in office there. This thing still has a lot more downside than potential upside. They'll probably get the website fixed at some point, but probably not soon enough. But even if they get the website, even the president's decision to respond to the public's criticism and concerns about not living up to the false promise he made about being able to keep your health care plan if you wanted it, when he made that decision, that's also going to contribute to a distortion in the risk pools. And so all the premiums that were offered and were approved by the insurance companies that are offering the policies under the exchanges are now going to be distorted. And if you also look at who is going to be most disinclined to go onto the website if it's poorly functioning, what sector of the population? There's a lot of the younger people that you need in those exchanges. They don't deal with bad websites, they're just screw it. I'm not going to deal with this. Those are the folks you need in the exchanges also to make sure you have that broad portfolio that'll ensure that those premiums will not result in a loss to the insurance companies. You also haven't really seen the people, because the consumers that haven't been able to get and sign up for their policies, they're also going to recognize that another promise that was made, that you'll be able to keep your doctor if you want it. There's a lot of those plans aren't going to have those providers that are in those plans. And so you're going to have another fallout when people realize they can't have their own physician, let alone some of the increase in premiums. And then the nightmare scenario for a lot of Democrats, if this plays out the way that I think it might, is that the insurance companies have to send out their policies for renewals with their premiums in October of next year, which will be right before the November elections. And so everyone that is signed up for the exchange this year, there's going to be premium adjustments next year based on experience, and also the portfolio of the profile of the people in those policies is inevitably going to be higher. And so you're going to see a whole cascading set of events here, none of which plays out well for the president or a lot of a lot of Democrats that have positioned themselves in support of the Affordable Care Act. So the politics of this, people were writing the Republicans off on the shutdown. If they don't screw that up in the next few months, and they keep the focus and just stay out of the way of what's happening with the Affordable Care Act, is that they are going to have a good chance of picking up the 6 net seats that they need to get the majority in the Senate.
By the way, to end that topic, one is the frightening thing actually for the Democrats is that whereas the average age of people who have insurance policies, period, is about 40, the average age of people who have successfully signed up is 50. So it's like absolutely opposite of where they really were hoping, which is to drive the number
Yeah.
down. The other story is that my son said, it doesn't matter if they fix the website, young people, they need an app anyway, so if they think they're gonna sign up even a functioning website, they're fooling themselves. I think that's a wise comment. One other question is, I think one of the wonderful vantage points that you have as being ahead of the ACC is that you essentially have the privilege of having CEOs and senior managers of a broad set of chemical companies, both large, petrochemical, and specialty chemical, so forth. And you talk to them all the time. As a group, what do you think are some of the areas that they're both, optimistic about, but what are also their concerns today as a group?
Well, my assessment and what I hear just, in my conversations, that is kind of consistent across most of the CEOs I deal with is, that they're very bullish on the U.S. I think I'm seeing a somewhat improved sentiment and assessment in terms of the opportunities in China in particular. I think there was a little concern earlier in the year in terms of some financial stability there, but I think I think I'm hearing less of that now. Everyone is pretty negative about Western Europe, and when and I think there's even what I'm hearing too with Mexico is actually generally pretty positive, and about lukewarm with Brazil. But I think that for the ones that have a major market share or their percentage of their operations is based in the U.S. and I represent the American Chemistry Council, so it's all pretty good from that perspective out there.
Well, Cal, thank you very much. I hope all of you will join me in thanking Cal for, first, a wonderful speech that I thought, I've seen a number of speeches about shale gas, and I think yours is absolutely the best I've seen about what effect it's going to have, but also had this opportunity to have this fireside chat and talk about some issues. So thank you very much.
Yeah.